Everyone knows at least one Mamas and the Papas tune, but do you know how hard it is to run a band with 2 women and 2 men in it? Being in a band with your buddies is hard enough, but add romance to the mix and, well, historically, it can lead to disaster. But one man's disaster is another man's rock and roll classic, I guess. We take you back to the exact night of their end. Fans of the Mamas and the Papas often describe the group as the quintessential representation of 1960s folk rock, celebrated for their intricate harmonies. But things inside the band were not as harmonious, and although they had the talent, it was the heart that led this band to die after only 3 years. Can you believe that? Ladies and gentlemen, gather round as we unravel the melodious mayhem, the harmonious havoc of the 1960s sensation, the Mamas and the Papas. Chapter 1, California Dreamin', The Rise. In the mid-1960s, the American music scene was graced by a quartet whose harmonies were as smooth as a California sunset. The Mamas and the Papas, comprised of John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, Denny Doherty, and Cass Elliot. This foursome burst onto the scene with hits like California Dreamin' and Monday Monday. Their unique blend of folk and rock captured the spirit of a generation yearning for change. But behind those harmonious melodies lay a discordant reality. John Phillips, the group's primary songwriter and de facto leader, was initially reluctant to include Cass Elliot in the lineup. Why? Well, because in his narrow view, her not narrow weight didn't fit the image he envisioned for the group. It took persistent effort, and perhaps a serendipitous bump on the head that allegedly expanded her vocal range to finally secure her place in the group. The story goes that while in the Virgin Islands, Cass was struck on the head by a falling pipe, which miraculously increased her vocal range by 3 notes. Mama Cass herself confirmed this tale in a 1968 interview with Rolling Stone. She said, quote, "It's true, I did get hit on the head by a pipe that fell down, and my range was increased by 3 notes. However, some friends later suggested that this entire story was concocted to provide a more palatable reason for John Phillips' initial hesitation to include her, which again was just due to her being overweight. Yep, John Phillips thought Mama Cass was too fat for rock and roll. And Cass knew it too. Wow, what a great way to start off. I wonder how many kids hit themselves in the head with the pipe trying to, sing better. Anywho, despite these challenges, Mama Cass's undeniable talent and determination eventually won over the group, leading to the formation of the Mamas and the Papas and their subsequent rise to fame. Chapter 2, The Night Everything Blew Up. The tangled web of love and betrayal within the Mamas and the Papas could rival a Shakespearean tragedy, or a really juicy tabloid. By the mid-1960s, the band was riding high on the success of their chart-topping hits, but backstage, their relationships were more chaotic than a sound check gone wrong. One of the most infamous and emotionally raw moments in the band's history occurred when Michelle Phillips' affair with Denny Doherty was fully exposed. And this just wasn't a quiet revelation over coffee. John Phillips, already suspicious, cornered Denny after a tense rehearsal. According to Michelle in her autobiography, California Dreamin', John stormed in and confronted Denny with a sharp intensity. He flat out said, quote, "You've been screwing my wife, haven't you?" It wasn't a question, it was an accusation laced with venom. Denny, visibly uncomfortable, reportedly admitted to the affair in a stammering confession. John's reaction? Well, explosive. He was known for his cool, calculated demeanor, but this time he snapped. The accounts are of him yelling, slamming his fist into tables, and calling both Denny and Michelle every name under the sun. Yeah, for the typically self-contained John, this was a rare emotional eruption. Michelle, always the firecracker in the group, did not back down, of course. In her version of events, she shouted back at John, refusing to let him play the victim. She screamed, "You're no saint, John," alluding to his own infidelities and manipulative tendencies. The room was thick with tension, and Cass Elliot, who had been quietly sitting on the sidelines, well, she broke her silence. Cass's heartbreaking interjection. Mama Cass, often seen as the glue that held the group together, was uncharacteristically subdued during that confrontation, until she wasn't. She looked at John and Michelle and she said, quote, "Do you think this is just about you two?" Her voice cracked as she continued, "You've both ruined everything for me." Mama Cass, who had harbored unrequited love for Denny for years, reportedly broke down in tears. For Cass, this wasn't just a professional crisis, it was a deeply personal one. Watching the two people she cared about the most betray not only John, but her too, it was devastating. She would later confide to friends, quote, "I was everyone's second choice. Even in this mess, I wasn't even an option." Michelle Phillips described Cass's outburst as gut-wrenching in hindsight, but she admitted that at the time she, quote, "couldn't feel sympathy for her because I was too busy defending myself." An emotional fallout. The aftermath of this blowout wasn't immediate reconciliation or resolution, it was emotional exhaustion. The band couldn't function in the days following the fight. Denny left rehearsals, Cass stopped showing up altogether. And Michelle and John, they barely spoke to each other except in rehearsals. The recording studio, well, it became a battlefield of passive-aggressive barbs and icy silences. In one session, John took a dig at Michelle's fidelity by changing lyrics mid-song, much to the amusement of the engineers, but not his bandmates. Years later, Denny reflected on the incident with regret. He said, quote, "I should have walked away. I should have said no, but I didn't. I hurt everyone, including myself." Why this fight mattered. Now, this wasn't just a clash of egos or a band spat over creative differences. This was raw, it was human emotion laid bare. John's betrayal was rooted in his controlling nature and fear of losing his wife and creative muse. Michelle's defiance came from years of feeling smothered by John's dominance. Denny's guilt reflected his inner conflict between loyalty to his friend and bandmate and his undeniable attraction to Michelle. And Cass's heartbreak, well, that was collateral damage of a love triangle that never even acknowledged her feelings. It's fights like these, messy, emotional, and heartbreakingly human, that make their story resonate beyond just the music. This wasn't just a band falling apart, it was four deeply flawed individuals navigating the consequences of love, betrayal, and ambition. The affair between Michelle Phillips and Denny Doherty was the powder keg that nearly blew the group apart. Michelle, John's young wife, was already a polarizing figure. In her memoir, Michelle describes their marriage as a whirlwind of highs and lows, with John's controlling tendencies clashing against her very free-spirited nature. She wrote, quote, "John would write love songs about me one day and accuse me of destroying his life the next." Denny Doherty, with his soulful voice and easy charm, was the opposite of John's rigid perfectionism. He was the fun one, the emotional heart of the group. In the biography Creeque by Matthew Greenwald, Denny admitted his feelings for Michelle were impossible to ignore. Denny said, quote, "We were drawn to each other in a way that felt inevitable. It wasn't about hurting John, it was just this thing we couldn't control." Of course, Cass Elliot was the quiet observer of this brewing disaster, though quiet may not be the right word. Because yes, Cass had that unrequited love for Denny, a fact that added a poignant layer to the already tangled relationships. Cass confessed in an interview, quote, "I loved him, but I knew it wasn't mutual. Still, I stayed because the music was worth it." When John found out about that affair that terrible day in the studio, the fallout was swift and brutal. He fired Michelle from the band, a move that shocked fans and led to the brief inclusion of Jill Gibson. Now, Jill was a photographer with no prior musical experience. Nope, fans were not pleased. In Michelle's absence, the group's chemistry was so forced, and John ultimately had to reinstate her, though it's unclear if it was for the sake of the music or the group's financial future. But the damage was done. The affair exposed all of the cracks in our foundation, Denny later reflected. It wasn't just Michelle and me, it was all of us, our insecurities, our addictions, our need for validation coming to the surface. Chapter 3, I Saw Her Again, The Fallout. As the band tried to move forward, their relationships became a minefield of resentment and mistrust. Their hit, I Saw Her Again, is a perfect example of how art imitates life, or maybe mocks it. Written by John Phillips and Denny Doherty, the song is widely believed to be about Denny's affair with Michelle. Imagine the tension of singing about your own infidelity on stage, night after night, with the people involved. I mean, yeah. In her book, Michelle recalls how rehearsals became battlegrounds. She said, quote, "John was constantly rewriting lyrics to take little digs at me. He thought he was clever, but it just made everything harder." Despite their personal turmoil, the group managed to deliver stunning performances. Cass Elliott's voice soared, even as she struggled with her own feelings of exclusion. She often felt like the odd one out, and not just because of her unrequited love for Denny, but also due to lingering insecurities about her weight and appearance. Michelle once said, quote, "Cass had this larger-than-life personality, but underneath that, she was deeply sensitive." The band's internal conflicts began to manifest publicly too. Late-night recording sessions turned into shouting matches, and their drug use escalated. John, in particular, developed a reputation for his heavy drinking and drug-fueled tirades. Michelle admitted, quote, "We were all a mess. It's a miracle we made it as long as we did." Chapter 4, Creeque Alley, the beginning of the end. By 1968, the writing was on the wall. The Mamas and the Papas recorded their final album in a haze of tension and disinterest. And you could tell, the songs lacked the spark that had defined their earlier work, and even their most devoted fans could sense the end was near. Denny said in a later interview, quote, "Recording that album felt like a funeral. We knew it was over, but no one wanted to say it out loud." Cass Elliot, who had long dreamed of a solo career, saw the breakup as both a blessing and a heartbreak. She said, "I love those guys, but I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for the group." For John and Michelle, the end of the band also marked the end of their marriage. John's jealousy and controlling behavior had driven them apart, and Michelle's affair with Denny, well, that of course was the final nail in the coffin. The Mamas and the Papas officially disbanded in 1968. Leaving behind a legacy of unforgettable music and a cautionary tale of what happens when personal lives collide with professional ambitions. Fans were left with a legacy of unforgettable harmonies and a string of folk rock hits. But what happened to the individual members after the group went their separate ways? Their post-band lives were a tapestry of solo endeavors, personal struggles, and untimely ends. Cass Elliot, the Dreamer. Cass Elliot, affectionately known as Mama Cass, arguably had the most successful solo career following the group's dissolution. With a powerhouse voice and magnetic stage presence, Cass was determined to establish herself as a solo artist. And she struck gold with the 1968 hit Dream a Little Dream of Me, a sultry jazz-infused number that became her signature song. This track, while released under the Mamas and the Papas name, symbolized her stepping into the spotlight on her own terms. And Cass, while she enjoyed that spotlight, she released 5 solo albums, showcasing her versatility with tracks that ranged from playful pop to emotional ballads. Albums like Bubblegum Lemonade and Something for Mama. And Cass Elliot, they received critical acclaim, cementing her as more than just a former member of a famous group. Her warm, engaging personality made her a favorite on TV as well. She was a regular guest on shows like Johnny Carson, Mike Douglas, and others. However, her career wasn't without its struggles. Cass faced persistent fat shaming in an industry obsessed with appearance. She addressed it with humor and grace, but those closest to her knew it really hurt. Her daughter Owen reflected this in an interview, saying, quote, "I think people underestimated how much she had to prove. She carried a lot of weight emotionally, no pun intended." Tragically, Cass's life was cut short in 1974 when she died of heart failure at just 32 years old. Rumors swirled about her death, most infamously the false claim that she choked on a ham sandwich. But the truth was simpler and sadder. A combination of exhaustion and years of stress had taken its toll. Her passing was a devastating loss to the music world, but her legacy, it lives on. And Cass Elliot, she remains an icon of talent, perseverance, and charm. John Phillips, the architect turned cautionary tale. John Phillips, often regarded as the group's creative engine, initially seemed poised for continued success. His skills as a songwriter had already been proven with hits like California Dreamin' and Monday Monday, and he quickly began working on solo projects. His 1970 solo album, The Wolf King of LA, it featured country-tinged tracks that showcased his songwriting prowess, but it failed to achieve significant commercial success. Despite the album's lackluster reception, it has since gained a cult following for its introspective lyrics and innovative sound. Unfortunately, John's personal life took a dark turn. The man struggled with drug addiction, and his creative output dwindled as his substance abuse spiraled out of control. By the late 1970s, John had become a cautionary tale of the excesses of fame, even serving time in prison for drug-related charges in 1981. His descent into addiction overshadowed much of his post-band career, though he eventually cleaned up his act and attempted a comeback. In the late 1980s, John reformed the Mamas and the Papas with his daughter Mackenzie Phillips and others, touring as a nostalgia act. While this version of the band was far removed from the original, it did allow John to keep the group's legacy alive. He too published his autobiography, Papa John, in 1986, offering a raw and often shocking account of his life, including his struggles with addiction and controversial personal relationships. John Phillips passed away in 2001 from heart failure. He was 65 years old. Despite the controversies surrounding his later years, his contributions to music remain undeniable. As Denny Doherty once said, John was a genius, but he was also his own worst enemy. Michelle Phillips, the Renaissance woman. Michelle Phillips transitioned from music to acting with remarkable success, becoming the only member of the group to achieve sustained prominence in Hollywood. Her ethereal beauty and natural charisma made her a sought-after presence in film and TV throughout the 1970s and 80s. Michelle's acting credits include roles in films like Dillinger in 1973, where she played John Dillinger's mole, and the cult classic Valentino in '77. She also made guest appearances on some really popular TV shows like Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, and Knots Landing, the latter of which she actually became a recurring character in the 1980s. While her acting career flourished, Michelle also worked to preserve the legacy of the Mamas and the Papas. She contributed to documentaries and retrospectives about the band, offering insights into their creative process and the turbulent dynamics that define them. Her 1986 autobiography, California Dreamin', provided a candid and sometimes humorous account of her life. From her whirlwind marriage to John Phillips to the height of the group's fame, it's a great read if you haven't. Check it out. Michelle Phillips remains a beloved figure in the entertainment industry. As of recent years, she has embraced her role as a keeper of the band's history, ensuring that their music and story continue to inspire new generations. Denny Doherty, the soulful survivor. Denny Doherty, the velvet-voiced tenor who provided the emotional core of the Mamas and the Papas, had a quieter post-band career compared to his bandmates. While his solo albums, What You Gonna Do in 1971 and Waiting for a Song in '74,
What you gonna do with the field and stream? What you gonna do with the water?
both showcased his rich vocals, they did not achieve significant commercial success. But Denny actually found a second life in theater. He starred in productions like Man of La Mancha, and he created his own one-man show, Dream a Little Dream, the nearly true story of the Mamas and the Papas. The show was, as you can imagine, a deeply personal exploration of his time in the band, weaving together storytelling and music to offer fans an intimate look at the group's highs and lows.
Hear the whistle blow 100 miles.
Critics praised it for its honesty and emotional depth, and it became a cult hit among fans. In interviews, Denny often reflected on the bittersweet nature of his time with the band. He said, quote, "We had something magical, but we also destroyed ourselves trying to hold on to it." Denny Doherty passed away in 2007 at the age of 66 from kidney failure. Denny left behind a legacy of music that continues to resonate today. His voice remains one of the defining elements of the Mamas and the Papas sound, and his contributions to their artistry are celebrated by fans and critics alike. The post-Mamas and the Papas lives of Cass Elliot, John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, and Denny Doherty were as varied and dramatic as their time in the band. Each member left their mark in unique ways, whether through solo artistry, acting, or storytelling. Yet, their shared history continues to cast a very long shadow, reminding us of the beauty and heartbreak that often accompanies creative collaboration. While their paths diverged, their shared legacy remains a testament to the power of music to capture the complexities of human relationships. The Mamas and the Papas may have been a fleeting phenomenon, but their impact endures. A dream, a little dream, a cautionary tale, and a celebration of the human spirit. Alright, that's enough of me. Now we really need to hear from you, the people, the fans. Because after all, we here at Do You Remember are nothing without you. So get down in the comments section and tell us your favorite Mamas and the Papas song. Maybe their best album. Did I forget something about this incredible group? Well, tell me in the comments section and teach us all. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up icon, it really helps a ton. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you never miss a memory. But most importantly, from all of us here at Do You Remember, we want to thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Mamas and the Papas, for the incredible music.